Hey, before we do anything else, we have to thank our sponsors, Smile Traveller, who have not only sent me to Barbados, which is very lovely, but also decked me out in this extremely fashionable cap.
Yeah, no, Smile aren't just good at making George look good, they're also specialists in worldwide sports travel. And this winter, they'll be taking England fans to the Caribbean for an exciting white ball series.
Hello and welcome to Ask George, where England have got their campaign back on track. Right, George, that's more like it from an England perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it was overwhelming, wasn't it? You don't want to read too much into victory against, sort of a semi-professional side, but England had a particular job to do and they did it, and they couldn't have done it much more convincingly. So a really good day at the office. Short days at the office are always the best, you know that.
Yes, I've done us a little bit of a favour there. And
Yeah.
let's get into it, opening up. Tim, on that theme, it appears Oman took their foot off the gas to help England's net run rate.
Very good. I think one of the things that I wondered about today was maybe in our quiet moments, our daydreaming or whatever, we all wonder how we might fare against, the top players. And I've been lucky enough to have a net against a couple of them at various times, and the answer is not very well. And I think you saw today the gulf, or no pun intended, between really seasoned international players and good. I don't know. I don't want to patronise them at all, but club cricketers, very good club cricketers, or similar, and it looked as if they were completely unaccustomed to that pace. And Wood and Archer, they're sharp. The Oman captain said afterwards they were the quickest, perhaps the quickest bowlers in world cricket, and his batters just haven't been able to cope. And Adil Rashid too. We're used to seeing experienced players who have faced him a lot find a way to play him and stuff. But it was a reminder today of how talented he is, and as I say, how good the standards of top professional international players are. So, yeah, I don't think there's anything at all untoward. I'm sure the question was tongue in cheek. Oman got a real pasting, but they're just learning their way in international cricket. And hopefully, they get more opportunities.
Yeah, and on that golfing class, next question is from Lee. Is a one-sided game like that doing the reputation of international cricket any favours?
I can see where you're coming from with that question. And in some ways, no. I think it was over in basically the time of a football game with added time, wasn't it? So, but let's remember the context. It's a 20-team World Cup with a view to encouraging the development of the game around the world, and whether or not you think it will, I think it's a worthy ambition. And we have seen shocks elsewhere, haven't we? So it looks very much as if the US are going to be in the Super Eights. And Afghanistan have come from a position, 20 years ago where they were barely playing to the stage where they look as if they're going to progress as well. So I think you've got to think of it as an investment or a transitional phase. And in that context, I think it's okay that you get the odd result like this, and it was dramatic. So, let's not just judge it by today, I think I would say. But I know what you mean. If you had bought a ticket as a neutral, you'd probably feel a wee bit shortchanged. But it was kind of dramatic what we saw. I mean, it does happen, doesn't it? So, no, I'm glad that there are 20 teams playing. I wouldn't even mind if they're 24, to be honest.
Yeah, back to England with Philip Sterling. With England's side still arguably possessing its greatest ever white ball batter and bowler, plus Jofra, why did we worry about net run rate?
Well, for lots of reasons. For a start, because it wasn't and still isn't entirely in England's hands. You only need it to rain, and that can happen. I mean, to be honest, there's a 30 or 35, I think, percent chance of rain in Antigua on Saturday. Very low chance in St. Lucia. So it's not entirely in England's hands. That's one thing. And also, Scotland could yet beat Australia. I mean, obviously, Australia are favourites for that game. But the point is, it wasn't in England's hands entirely. And who knows how they're going to do. So, yeah, they made their point very eloquently today that they certainly shouldn't have been written off. And I don't know what other people wrote. I don't think we've been writing them off. They did the job that was required of them. But you never want to get in a position, do you, in these tournaments where your fate is not in your own hands, and that's what happened in these last few days. Partly bad luck, it has to say, but partly because they had a pretty big loss against Australia.
Yeah, and
I mean, just to put it in perspective, Australia got knocked out of the World Cup in Australia in pretty similar circumstances. They got a bit of a shoe-in from New Zealand, which put them behind the net run rate. Then they lost a game on weather. You know, that it rained in Melbourne for the game that was meant to be against England, and then it's too late. So it can happen. It's somewhat unfortunate, but it's also the dramatic schedule of the competition. And yeah, it could yet rain. I don't think it will. I don't want to alarm anyone. It rains here all the time, but it just passes through very sharp showers.
Well, if that's not the case, and if England do go through, Johns asks, do you think they should consider playing Ben Duckett in the Super 8s if they qualify, with lots of left-arm spinners for West Indies and South Africa?
Yeah, it's a completely reasonable suggestion. I'm sure they will consider it. I'm sure they'll consider it. He's been netting well, and I think he's a good player and a good fielder. I think he'd be an asset to most sides. But I'd be a bit surprised if they brought him in. You know, you probably mean for Johnny Bairstow, and I think he's been written off a bit prematurely by people. He basically had one bad inning into this tournament. He averages 77 in international cricket in Antigua. Because I saw there were some stats circulated which take his whole T20 World Cup career across continents, across many years, and amalgamate them into one statistic. And I don't know, is that particularly revealing? Not really. I always feel you can kind of do anything with statistics. You know, if you start with a hypothesis and then find the statistics to back it up, you can probably do it. I think it probably would have sent the wrong message if they had made large amount of changes to the side. Do you remember how they did before the Mumbai game against South Africa in the ODI World Cup? So he's had one poor innings in this tournament, and I think they were likely to stick with him. And maybe, you know, I know that Mark Wood and Johnny Bairstow, I think, are both quite peeved at various people in the media. And maybe that didn't do him any harm. Maybe, you know, maybe, I don't know. I'm not saying it was beneficial, but maybe it encouraged them a little bit. Johnny's always seems to be great when he's got a point to prove. But he's such a destructive player. And in a game where you're trying to increase your net run rate in the way England were today, I absolutely think they were right to stick with him for what it's worth.
Yeah, and a strike rate of 400 today. So done himself.
Yeah, I mean, equally, you don't want to read too much into it, do you? Because they weren't the toughest opposition, were they? But it was, but it's still got to be done, and they did do it. So I've seen so many games where people have thought that England would win easily, and they've lost. You know, seen them lose to Netherlands and Ireland and Scotland and Zimbabwe going way back when, you know, they were a part-time side and all the rest of it. So you can't be complacent. You don't want to take it for granted. I remember Graham Gooch saying years ago, when you're England captain, it's rubbish, because if you get beaten, you're useless, and if you win, well, everyone expected you to anyway. And it was one of those days, no doubt about it. But look, they had a job to do, and they did it. They couldn't have done it much better.
Yeah, and staying on the theme of England batsmen, Sushant asks, has Phil Salt filled the position of Jason Roy? Those two sixes were so crucial at the start of the innings.
Well, I think he has, actually. I mean, he definitely hasn't achieved what Jason Roy achieved in his terrific career, and I think he's not remembered quite as well as he should be sometimes. So Jason Roy, obviously, for several years, he was a huge part of the 19 winning side and had been part of the 2015 resurgence, and deserves a huge amount of credit for that. And Phil Salt hasn't yet become a player who's achieved that, but he looks super. He looks the comparison with Jason Roy is spot on. He just is uninhibitedly aggressive, completely selfless, absolutely sums up the way this team wants to play. Looks as if he's an asset in the field as well. Yeah, looks like a really, really good selection right now.
And lastly, we're back to Australia, I'm afraid. Ron Martin, will Australia just call up anyone with an Aussie passport who happens to be on holiday in St. Lucia for the Scotland game?
No, I mean, even if they wanted to do that, and they don't, I don't think. I mean, anyway, they can't. No, there's 15 There are 15 in each squad, and to make changes, you have to have them cleared by a technical committee, and then they're not going to be able to get back in. So, um, no, that's not going to happen. They might rest players, and why wouldn't they? They rested players throughout this tournament, but they can only pick from the 15, and whoever they pick's pretty good. And I don't think I've ever seen an Australian player, a team, sort of take it easy, play soft. So I think what happened, look, is Josh Hazelwood was asked a very reasonable question in a press conference, and he hadn't really thought about it, and he gave an honest, sort of somewhat rambling answer, which said, "Oh yeah, I can see the benefits of I can't remember what he said, taking it slow, dragging it out, maybe." Against Scotland, because it would eliminate England and that would be good for us. But he did go on to say, but we won't do that. I don't think we'd do that. And he probably didn't know the regs. I mean, I think one of the papers in England ran a piece about, this is what Australia should do. So we didn't. Who knows all the code of conducts before you look them up, eh? I mean, who can remember it all? So I think it's actually worked out quite well for England in that Australia have had a reminder of what's acceptable and what is within the bounds of gamesmanship and the code of conduct. And I don't think there's a cat and hell's chance that they'll go soft on Scotland, to be honest. It's not the way they play. I think the Australian attitude will be, let's beat Scotland. If England qualify and we have to play them again, we'll beat them too. That's the way they are. And I don't think England supporters should worry about Australia losing. I think they should worry about trying to beat them when that comes across, if that opportunity comes again later in the tournament. And it looks a lot more likely now. But yeah, it was interesting, wasn't it? People, I don't think, realised how clear the code of conduct was on that particular point. And it's very clear. It specifically says you can't try and change your net run rate. You can't play that sort of tactical awareness in a group game in an ICC tournament. So not really a lot of room for doubt. Look, after everything that Australia cricket's been through in the last years, I'm very strongly of the opinion that they were somewhat hard done by with the ball tampering thing. There was quite a lot of hypocrisy and overreaction. They've tried so hard to improve their reputation and culture. I cannot believe they're going to go out on a limb, which would make them seem weak anyway. They shouldn't be fearful of England. That's not their way. And I hope that England and Australia do play each other later in the tournament. It'll be a lot of fun, as ever.
Yeah, like you say, I'm sure nothing untoward's going on there, but does it bring into the question the idea that, these group games should, to prevent anything, if it was to happen, they should be played at the same time, really, shouldn't they?
Yeah, of course they should. Yeah, I mean, everyone knows that. And the benefits of not playing them at the same time, which is basically so you can have extra TV coverage, are so minor. You could have wall-to-wall coverage. I just don't think the risk reward is worth it. There were all sorts of changes to cricket, both domestically and internationally, years ago to ensure that there wasn't any incentive to try and spot fix, match fix, do anything of the sort. And while I don't think for a second that's going to happen, I couldn't have been more clear on that, could I? You can see how a situation could arise which could incentivize it. And that just seems an unavoidable mistake, doesn't it? So you'd hope in future tournaments the games could start at the same time. And yeah, that's a bit annoying for the broadcasters, but I think it's probably something that they could do. By the way, I think I'm right in saying if the US qualify for the Super 8s, I think that means they qualify automatically for the next T20 World Cup, doesn't it? In India and Sri Lanka. That would be pretty amazing, though.
Would.
Well, just all encouraging American cricket before the Olympics. I don't know, it might be just the fillip American cricket needs, because the worry is you have this tournament and there's nothing consolidating any progress it may have made. But people watching for the first time in America, watching those New York games in particular, are just going to think cricket's a really low-scoring, stodgy game.
Yeah, it'd be good if there's something on the horizon to keep the cycle going.
By the way, you're the player of the match today, because other people won't know, but we've had a hell of a job trying to get online, and I don't know how you've done it in the end, by sheer force of will. People didn't like our frogs. They didn't like the sea.
Yeah.
So I hope that this ridiculous octopus and this crab here are are okay, because we've had a hell of a job connecting, and Owen here's the smile player of the match.
Well, let's not speak too soon because it hasn't. We haven't finished recording yet, but fingers crossed.
Well done. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be back on Saturday.
Very soon.
Hopefully, there won't be any rain, and we'll have a full game to look forward to.
Cheers. Thanks for the questions as ever.